So the headline that you guys have just been talking about is a headline that crossed the wires a few moments ago from Bloomberg, saying that Trump told advisors to proceed with $200 billion in tariffs. The headline here is that Trump is said to want about $200 billion in China tariffs despite the talks. So to reprise where we are here, going into this week, a lot of observers expected that the Trump administration was set to impose that $200 billion in additional tariffs that have been in the process for some time now, and that would come at some point this week. The president tweeted sort of an anticipatory tweet about that over the weekend. There was wide expectation that that would happen. Then toward the middle of the week, I started getting indication from people here at the White House that perhaps the hurricane, perhaps other factors might delay the $200 billion in additional tariffs. And now we're seeing this one headline that we have not independently verified just yet that says that the president wants the tariffs despite these talks, which we heard about late in the week, that ongoing talks with the Chinese government between the U.S. and Chinese side. So where does that leave us? It gives us the impression that what's going on behind the scenes is there are various factions inside this White House, some of whom want the tariffs, others which do not. The president appears to be conducting a live discussion with those different factions about which way to proceed here. No indication that those are coming immediately, but of course the president can decide anything he wants at any time he wants to decide it. So that's one story that's breaking here at the White House. At the same time, and I'm just going to call this up on my phone here as we're talking, because we're doing this in real time, Scott, we're also getting this news about Paul Manafort. And I wanted to just highlight for you something that's I think interesting, is that the president's legal team put out two statements in response to the Manafort news within minutes of each other. The first statement said this, said the president did nothing wrong and Paul Manafort will tell the truth. Then minutes later, the legal team responded with an additional statement which changed that line of the statement. The new statement saying simply, the president did nothing wrong, period, omitting the point about Paul Manafort telling the truth. So the legal team here is adjusting its public comment on this Paul Manafort news in real time within just a few minutes of itself, updating and correcting its previous statement. So I think that gives you a sense that the legal team is perhaps not confident that Paul Manafort will tell the truth, or the legal team doesn't want to be in a position of saying anything on behalf of Paul Manafort, who of course they don't work for. So a lot of moving parts here in Washington right now. $200 billion in Chinese tariffs on the line. The president and his aides trying to figure out now exactly what Paul Manafort's going to be cooperating on and what it means for this president and this presidency, Scott.
It's hard to know the answer to many of those questions, Eamon, because we haven't seen the 17-page agreement yet.
Right.
It's interesting that the market didn't move hardly at all on the Manafort news, perhaps because we haven't seen the agreement itself, and now
right.
we see it move dramatically off of the trade news, so you can fully understand where the sensitivity of investors now lies.
Sure.
I have one more question for you, though, related to this Manafort news, and perhaps you can address it. Let's not forget that Mr. Manafort, and even though we don't know exactly what he has agreed to tell prosecutors, he was inside that Trump Tower meeting, which the president has maintained throughout that he knew nothing about. So it raises the question of what Manafort knows about that, if anything, and what he's willing to tell the Mueller investigators, if anything, on that front as well.
It definitely does. So let's review the bidding here as to where we are in terms of Paul Manafort, right? What we know is that Paul Manafort's now agreeing to plead guilty to a number of charges, 2 charges relating to his conduct before he was part of the presidential campaign. The speculation had been that what Mueller wanted to do was flip Paul Manafort, put pressure on him, and offer a lighter sentence in exchange for cooperation. Now the question is, it appears to be a cooperation agreement, so it's cooperation on what exactly? And that's the question right now. The president's defenders hope that what's going on here is that what Paul Manafort is cooperating on is other misdeeds and alleged crimes relating to lobbying, offshore finance, other skullduggery that predated the presidential campaign. They're hoping that he's not cooperating on something related to the presidential campaign. But as you point out, he was the chairman of the president's campaign in 2016 during a key period of time. So it's possible that he knows things that go to the heart of what Mueller's investigation was set up to look into, and that is the possibility of collusion with the Russians. We don't know the answers to those questions yet. When we get those 17 pages, we might get a little bit more indication, but we might not know even by the end of the day today.